everyone, this is Warhawk Beyond 2040 and welcome to another edition of the Jazz Albums Review Series. And today I'm going to be taking a look at another 2024 release, this time from legendary guitarist, composer and bandleader Mike Stern, and this is his latest recording for Mac Avenue Records, Echoes and Other Songs. So Echoes and Other Songs marks the first time since 2017's Trip that Mike Stern has recorded and released an album featuring new material, and it also marks Mike Stern's 17th studio album that he has put out under his name as a bandleader. And there's a certain level of expectation you can have from a new Mike Stern album. Mike Stern does what he does, and he does it as good as anybody I've ever seen or heard. And he has a well-structured formula that he uses for all of his albums. And when you've been around as long as Mike Stern has, for well over 4+ decades of playing and making music, Mike Stern, of course, has a very distinct and recognizable sound. When you hear him, you know straight away it's him. There are very few guitar players in the world that sound quite like him. He has a very distinct sound. And I've said before that if you were to combine Pat Metheny and Jimi Hendrix together, you would get Mike Stern. He has the haunting melodies of Pat Metheny and the burning capability of Jimi Hendrix. But Mike Stern is very much his own man and incorporates different styles of jazz, rock, and blues, among others. And if you were to take 5 different Mike Stern albums from his catalogue, they do sound the same. It's what I would expect because it's him. But if you listen very closely, they don't all sound quite the same. And with Echoes and Other Songs, does it sound the same as the previous albums? Yes and no. Yes, it does sound the same because it's Mike Stern. He's got his own sound, he's got his own style. No, it doesn't because it's a little bit different because, yes, it's got all those classic hallmarks we can expect from Mike Stern. Again, that same structured formula that he has been using very well for well over 4+ decades. But there's other things going on. And, I've listened to this album a number of times already. And when I listen to it, I would say, yes, that's Mike Stern. That's what I can expect. And as I said earlier, he does what he does and does it as good as anyone I've ever seen or heard. But there were other things going on. There were world influences, different instruments, different sounds, different textures. And I sat there listening to this, thinking to myself, okay, this is different. I wasn't really expecting this from Mike Stern. It still sounds like him. It's what I know. It's what I come to familiarize myself with when I hear a Mike Stern album. But there was other things going on, and it was quite incredible. And this album's got 11 tracks, all written and composed by Mike Stern, and it's 80+ minutes long. That's quite a long album for Mike Stern. And, Mike Stern's albums are very well structured. You've got half burning, you've got a mixture of ballads, you've got a mixture of world influences. It's what you expect, as I said, a well structured formula. And as I said, there's lots of different things going on. And I really enjoyed this album a lot. It was very good. And it's exactly what I expect from Mike Stern. But at the same time, there were a couple of surprises in this album. And I was pleasantly surprised. I thought, okay, I was not expecting that from Mike Stern. So, very enjoyable album. And as I said, there's a certain level of expectation you have with a new Mike Stern album. All the trademarks are there, all the hallmarks are there. But when you listen closely, as I did with this album, you'll be pleasantly surprised that, okay, this is new, this is different. I like it. I really do. And for Echoes and Other Songs, Mike Stern has assembled an all-star cast of world-class musicians. So, of course, Mike Stern is on guitar. We've got world-renowned saxophonist Chris Potter, who is featured on most of the entire album, with the exception of 3 tracks. We've got Jim Beard on piano and keyboards, who produced this album. And sadly, this would be Jim Beard's last appearance, as he would sadly pass away not too long after this album was put out. And Jim Beard has been Mike Stern's go to guy for producing. Jim Beard has pretty much produced virtually Mike Stern's entire catalogue of albums, and he's pretty much played on almost every Mike Stern album. And Jim Beard, one of the all-time great keyboardists of all time, and this is as much a Mike Stern album. I look at this as a tribute to Jim Beard. So this is kind of like our way of saying goodbye to him and for all of the amazing work he has done, not just for producing, but his playing as well. And he just sounds amazing as always. Christian McBride on acoustic and electric bass. What more can you say? Christian McBride, one of the greatest bass players of all time. We've got Antonio Sanchez on drums, of course, best known for his legendary long association as the main collaborator for Pat Metheny. And, you know, it's really good to hear a different side of Antonio Sanchez's drumming. And it's great to hear him in this environment. You know, I've been so used to hearing him playing with Pat Metheny for what seems like forever. It's nice to see him break the mold a little bit and get to hear him in a different context with another guitar player. And trust me, Mike Stern, he's a heavyweight. You know, it doesn't get any more heavier than Mike Stern. And Antonio Sanchez, he just sounds absolutely fantastic on this album. And him and Mike Stern work really well together. And what a treat, you know, getting to hear Stern and Sanchez play off against one another. Definitely one of the highlights of this album. And then we got Mike Stern's wife, Lenny Stern, on Nigoni, which is like a very weird and unusual instrument. It's kind of like a, how do I explain it? It sounds like a sitar, and she's on 3 tracks, and she adds a very different flavor to the music. She's a great guitar player herself. You know, I've seen her with Mike Stern, and she's a brilliant guitar player, but she doesn't play guitar on this album. She kind of switches gears here a little bit, but it's a very unusual instrument and it adds a different dynamic to Mike Stern's music, and it's a welcome one. Hence what I said earlier, a little bit of different surprises there and unexpected ones as well. Then we got R2 Tuchiborkayam on percussion. Of course, anybody who knows that name, he was a member of legendary guitarist Al Di Meola's World Sinfonia band. He's on percussion on pretty much all of this album except 2 tracks. He's one of the greatest percussionists in the world, and he just adds so many different layers to the music. And then we got Richard Boner on bass and vocals. And Richard Boner is no stranger to Mike Stern. Mike Stern and Richard Boner collaborated together on Mike Stern's 2001 album, Voices, and he's here again, and he adds that flavor to what he brought to Voices. You know, those wordless vocals, which he also incorporated in the Pat Metheny group as well, and he brings that here. So he kind of brings that PMG sort of flavor to the music. And then we got longtime collaborator Dennis Chambers, who's on 3 tracks. What can you say, really? Dennis Chambers, one of the greatest drummers in the universe. A real badass, a real man's man, and he just brings that power that we know and love, and that's made him one of the greatest of all time. And then we've got Bob Franceschini on soprano saxophone on 1 track and tenor saxophone on 2 tracks. He's an amazing sax player, and he's been with Mike Stern for like what seems like forever. And I look at him in the same light as I did with another great sax player who played with Mike Stern for many years, the late great Bob Berg. And you know, I do hear some of Bob Berg in Bob Franceschini's playing. And, you know, Mike Stern and Bob Berg, they were together playing on many albums for years and years. So he definitely brings that Bob Berg flavour to the music. He's an incredible sax player. And what an all-star cast we got here. Whew! Absolute dynamite stuff. So we kick off this album with Connections, which is 8 minutes long, and it's got great guitar playing, of course, from Mike Stern, and some really good playing from Chris Potter. Now, Chris Potter, right now, he is the ultimate go-to sax player. He is everywhere. He is playing with everyone. And he has played with Mike Stern before. He was featured on Mike Stern's All Over the Place, but he was only on like a couple of tracks. So to actually hear Chris Potter playing with Mike Stern on virtually most of this album was a welcome treat because, as I said earlier, Mike Stern is a real heavyweight guitar player. And when I learned that Chris Potter was going to be playing on Mike Stern's next album, I thought, okay, I know what Chris Potter brings to the table. I saw what he could do with Pat Metheny. Pat Metheny is like the godfather of guitar playing. You know, that's big league stuff. So when I heard he was going to be playing with Mike Stern, I thought, okay, Mike Stern's a heavyweight, you know, major league. And I tell you what, Chris Potter is no slouch. He really holds his own with Mike Stern and he really matches up very well. He's obviously a different sax player to some of the guys that Stern's played with before. You know, Bob Berg, Bob Shepard, Bob Mintzer, you know, to name a few, even Bob Malik as well. He brings his own style, but I'll tell you what, he is no slouch here. He really burns on this album, and his playing throughout this album is just excellent. And as I said, Chris Potter, the ultimate go-to sax player, he comes in, does what he does best, and he delivers. And some excellent playing from him. Great drumming from Antonio Sanchez. Great electric bass work from Christian McBride. He's mostly known as an upright acoustic bass player. That's his main thing. But I'll tell you what, he's no slouch when it comes to electric bass. And, you know, he matches up very well with Mike Stern. And Jim Beard, he's just a magnificent piano player and keyboardist. And he brings so much layers and textural colors to the music. And his presence is really felt throughout this album. And wow, great opener. And this definitely helped set the tone for what this album was going to be all about. Echoes is another great track as well. Stuff Happens is excellent. Spacebar is another great track as well. I Hope So. Kind of reminds me of PMG a little bit with Richard Boner's vocals. He just brings that different level of colouring to the music. Where's Leo is an excellent track. Gospel Song is another great track. Crumbles is a great track as well. And Curtis is a great song as well. I Love Climate, another great song. And Could Be is another great song. So a lot of the songs here are quite fairly long. They're all like 8 minutes to 7 minutes. And the shortest track is like 4 minutes and 56 seconds. So it's quite a long album, as I said earlier, 80 plus minutes long of material. So it's a fairly long album, but it's a very enjoyable album. And everybody is just on top form. Bob Franceschini is great on tenor and soprano sax. Dennis Chambers, he just kicks ass as always on the drums. Richard Boner, bringing that flavour that he had from Voices, magnificent musician. Arto, Triple Potroyan, great percussionist. Lenny Stern, great guitar player, but the instrument she plays really brings that, you know, worldly flavour to Mike Stern's material. And Mike Stern, what more can you say about him? One of the greatest guitar players of all time. He's on top form. It's a little bit of a laid back album. It's got burning, but it's also laid back at the same time. But it's what I expect. It's a Mike Stern album. He does what he does. And as I said, he does it as good as anybody I've ever seen or heard. And every track from top to bottom is excellent. Yes, it's a well structured formula, but it's a formula that's brought Mike Stern great success over the past 4+ decades. And the standout tracks for me are Connections, Echoes, Gospel Song, I Hope So, Crumbles, Curtis, Climate, and Could Be. But the whole album, from start to finish, is excellent and a very strong outing for Mike Stern. 17 studio albums. And of course, don't forget all the collaborations with Jeff Lorber and Eric Johnson. He's done a lot of music, and Mike Stern, he just continues to keep getting better and better. And as far as I'm concerned, Mike Stern has never really done a bad album. And that's another expectation that you can have with Mike Stern. You know you're going to get a good album, and you know it's not going to be bad. And if Mike Stern did put out a bad album, I'll just put it down to as, yeah, maybe that was just a bad day at the office. But Mike Stern never lets you down, always delivers the goods, and he just continues to keep getting better and better. But a magnificent album, very enjoyable. Listen to this now about 3 times already, and it's just excellent. Absolutely love this album. Highly recommended. If you're a fan of Mike Stern, check this one out. You won't be disappointed. So there you have it. Mike Stern, Echoes, and Other Songs, a worthy addition to the ever-growing catalogue of one of the greatest guitar players of all time, Mike Stern. He's the man, and he shows no signs of slowing down. Love it. So that's going to be it from me. I'm going to wrap this up now. What's your favourite track from Mike Stern, Echoes, and Other Songs? Is it Connections, Echoes, Stuff Happens, Spacebar, I Hope So, Where's Leo, Gospel Song, Crumbles, Curtis, Climate, or Could Be? There's no right or wrong answer. We all have our favourite tracks. You know what to do, guys. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, leave your thoughts and comments down below, and I will see all of you next time for another edition of the Jazz Albums Review Series. So until then, take care, everybody, and stay safe. And once again, as always, much appreciated. Thanks for listening.